first, let's bring in media writer for The Australian, Sophie Ellsworth. Sophie, we all pay for our dearest ABC, yet for some reason they also advertise. Now, you revealed in The Australian that advertising has increased markedly. How on earth is this justified?
Well, Caroline, it's certainly a contentious issue. My story revealed that in the March quarter, the ABC spent $6 million on advertising, promotions and audience research, and about $3.8 million of that alone, Caroline, was on advertising just in the last quarter. This is a lot of money. I think many Australians would be concerned that the ABC is spending to advertise itself, and many would argue that they don't need to advertise. We pay for their content regardless. So why are they pouring millions of dollars every month into audience research, promotions and advertising? And is it necessary? So this data is quite concerning and shows that there has been increases in the March quarter compared to the previous March quarter. So I think if they're going to be transparent about this too, Caroline, they need to publish these figures in their annual reports, which they no longer do, and these figures are only able to be obtained via FOI.
Well, that's not really good enough. They absolutely should be more transparent. But do we know if this advertising actually works?
Well, Caroline, if you go on their figures, they just last week I wrote a story that their radio audiences are diminishing. They had radio audience falls in their three key markets in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. And we know that their TV audiences are also falling. So you could argue perhaps this isn't working, but I think perhaps they need to look at their spending and see, because they're always crying poor, the ABC, is it necessary to be spending money on advertising what Australians already pay for?
Entirely possible. Also, the advertising could just be stemming the flow. And, you know, it's not just the ABC, but all broadcast networks are facing challenges managing the changing habits of younger demographics who, as we know, Sophie, skew heavily towards digital platforms. But how stark is that change?
Well, a report came out this week, Caroline, that the audience numbers have declined by 83% in terms of how much, should I say, people are watching content. So teenagers back in 2011 were consuming about 75 minutes a day of TV content, and that has now fallen to 13 minutes. Now, as we know, Caroline, a lot of people have changed the way that they view content. A lot of people are streaming content when it suits them. They're not sitting down with their evening meal and watching programs at designated times. So this is a real challenge for all networks, is to make sure that they can keep capturing these audiences, but also catering for people who don't want those rigid timetables to watch the shows that they love.
And I suppose that's the point going forward. How quickly and easily are broadcast networks adjusting to this very, very significant change?
Well, I would argue that they're adapting to it pretty well, because we have very good streaming services in Australia. Australians love to stream. They will pay for their content. You know, a lot of households have multiple streaming platforms, whether they are paid or free. So I think Australians can adapt. The broadcasters have adapted to it, but you know, this impacts their bottom line too. So they have to keep these viewers, particularly those that other than the ABC and SBS, because they rely on advertising dollars, and they need to keep those viewers so that they get the advertising dollars as a result.
Now, on to the furore from over the weekend at the Arj Barker show, and a member of the audience was apparently forced to leave for breastfeeding during the show. Now, that mother was interviewed by the Project, and during the interview, this happened.
I just thought it'd be really nice to do something that I hadn't done in a while, and just sort of get back to sort of a pre-baby me. She's super cranky right now.
Okay, maybe she can go to Dad just for a quick second. But like, you know, a mum with three little kids, I reckon you need a laugh.
Yeah. Be careful. Okay, sorry guys.
Sophie, as you well know, babies don't have an on and off switch. Sometimes they cry and sometimes they disturb the adults. Is there a substantive issue here, or has everyone just been caught up in a fuss?
Well, Caroline, everyone loves babies to, be out and about with their mums. They should be able to do that. But I would argue at an event, at a nighttime comedy event where, audience pay for their tickets, they go there to enjoy the show. When you have a baby that is making a lot of noise, it's very disruptive to all involved. Now, there's disputing reports over whether this baby was making a lot of noise or not, but I don't think it's really the place that babies are meant to be because it can just be disruptive, like you said. And if you are going to take babies to events like this, you need to be sitting at the back of the room. So if the baby does make a noise, you can quickly escape. But this, I think, there's conflicting reports here, Caroline, of what actually unfolded. But if a baby is making noise at one of these events, I would argue that it's really disruptive for those people who've paid for their tickets to see this event.
Fair enough, Soph. And on to politics. And in recent days, two independents have announced a run for the federal seat of Higgins. Apparently, they want a job share a seat in Parliament. Here's what constitutional expert Anne Twomey had to say.
There is a lot of confusion going on here about the interaction between the Constitution and legislation. What about Section 57 of the Commonwealth Electoral Act? It says this: one member of the House of Representatives shall be chosen for each electoral division. Couldn't really be much clearer than that, could it?
So if I appreciate what they're trying to do, but they're taking the piddle a bit, aren't they?
Well, Caroline, in theory, I think it all sounds great, but in practice, I think it's going to be very hard to make this work. And how can you be juggling such a critical role and sort of going, oh, I'm off this week, you pick up the pieces and then I'll pick them up the following week? And I think that's pretty problematic too for constituents who perhaps want to be in touch with their MP and they're not sure which one. Do we prefer the one that there's week one or the one who's on the second week? I think it becomes a bit blurry. So in theory, I think the idea people probably like, but in practice, I think it's very difficult to be able to make something like this work.
I agree. And you also think about when you get to the other end of things and you're coming up towards an election and you want to hold your MP accountable. Well, which one are you holding accountable? Which one do you like what they've done or not like what they've done? Which one are you voting for? I actually think that there becomes very difficult on the other end when you are looking for that accountability in your MP. Anyway, on to the international scene. And as you well know, we've seen a continued escalation in the Middle East. The US is apparently trying to avert a full-blown war. But with Biden's shambolic record on foreign affairs, you only just have to look to the US exit from Afghanistan, along with this week his mix-up of Rafah and Haifa. I really don't hold a great deal of hope, Soph. But what does this effort involve and who's actually doing the heavy lifting here in the US?
Well, you would hope it would be Biden. I mean, he's the man in charge and his tenure could well be up at the upcoming election. And how he handles this is very critical, Caroline. But we know that there was a lot of issues after those deaths of the aid workers and whether the US would be wavering in its support of Israel. But look, this is up to Biden to sort of lead here and show that he can, be authoritative in these situations. But I think his track record has shown that when it comes to these tough challenges, he's not always the man you want there in the top job.
Look, I don't have a great deal of confidence, I won't lie. But so the fact of the matter is the US are the big kids on the block. The rest of us are all watching this. How do we have confidence in the US when they don't seem to be really sure about their position themselves?
Well, Caroline, that's the million-dollar question. How do we have confidence? And I think whether Americans have confidence in their own president will be shown later this year. But I think many people believe President Biden is not the man for the job. He's not up to being president, and he's not good in these tough situations. So that is the million-dollar question that a lot of people will want answered. But and many people, I think, would argue if President Trump is president, he would handle things quite differently.
I think that's fair. I think he definitely would handle things differently. And speaking of things that would probably be handled differently, we've seen some shocking footage out of Columbia University in the US. Here is a Jewish professor being barred from his own campus.
Back up, please. My card has been deactivated? Why? Can you back up, please? Wait. Whoa. Everybody, my card has been deactivated. This is Cass Holloway, the COO. This is Gerald Lewis. They were in the meeting where I asked them if Hamas is a terror organization, and they couldn't say. I am a professor here. I have every right to be everywhere on campus. You cannot let people that support Hamas on campus and me, a professor, not go on campus. Let me in now.
So if the professor makes a really good point here, he should be able to go anywhere on campus. It's not a crime to be Jewish. What happens next here? Who's taking responsibility for this?
Well, this is the problem, Caroline, with universities across the world. We've seen many people at these universities become activists. And I think it's really concerning, like you say, that he can't just go about his business without being attacked by this. And I think it's a sad state of affairs when our universities can't all live in harmony and operate in harmony and carry on like that. And I think there's really got to be a clamping down on it. But this is a pretty sad state of affairs, unfortunately, Caroline.
It is really sad, Sophie, because if this was happening anywhere else in the broader community, I think people would struggle to get away with it. And this leads me on, I suppose, to, is there a broader question here around whether our tertiary institutions, are they fit for purpose?
Well, Caroline, you certainly would hope that they are fit for purpose, and they need to come out and, condemn this type of behaviour. It's not okay to be attacking people like this, but that footage just says it all, and it shows that these universities are, they've got a problem with activism on campus, and they need to deal with it quickly and appropriately to make sure that people can get on with their daily lives.
And just one last thing, Sophie, where's the political courage? Where is the political will and the moral clarity that we expect to see from the US on something like this?
Well, it's not there, Caroline. That's pretty obvious. And again, the US has their issues right now, and that's why we've got, obviously, with this presidential election coming up, things could change quite significantly if there is a change of president.
Yeah, perhaps it's just an absolute cluster situation, as they would say. Sophie Ellsworth, thank you as always for your time.